Hello there. We are almost through our life science unit, and we're up to the lesson on evolution terms, or on evolution itself. And I wanted to remind you, if you're using the textbook, that there are more Punnett squares practice problems on there. So if you want to check those out, they're in there. This lesson begins on page 158 and goes through page 161. And there are just a few terms here that we'll hit and move on. The first is adaptation. An adaptation is a trait that is common in a group because it improves function. And to give you an example of this, I want you to picture in your mind some yellow moths. Moths are like butterflies, but I want you to picture in your mind some yellow, or let's say white moths. So picture hundreds of those white moths, and they're landing on a dark tree trunk. Okay? Those moths, white moths on a dark tree trunk, are going to be very easy for predators to see. Over time, those white moths evolve into dark moths so that they're not as easy to find for predators. I'm going to try to show you a picture so that you can understand what I'm talking about. Okay, here we go. Look at this fella, this top one. Look how easy that white moth is to see. So if you're a bird flying along looking for lunch and there he is, that's going to be really easy to spot. But can you see the one down below him? Down here, I can't point to this one because I'm on the internet, but there's a moth down below him, down and to the left. He is much easier to hide. It's going to be a lot harder for the bird to see. That's an adaptation, that over time the moths change their colors so that they become harder to see. That's a very good example. But look at this one. This is where you would want to be a white moth on a white tree because you're blending in much better. So adaptations occur in a species when change is necessary for them to survive. And the moths are a very common experiment where that's concerned. A common ancestor is an organism or a living thing from which other species have descended. Okay. Diversity is simply variation. Black moths, white moths, yellow moths, there's variation in the moth population. That is diversity. Evolution simply means genetic change over time. If you visit some of the old houses in Charleston, South Carolina, that were built before the Civil War, you will notice that the doorknobs are very low to the ground. That's because people in those days were generally shorter than they are now. So over time, we as people have grown generally taller. Now there are always exceptions. You will find folks who are shorter and folks who are very tall, but generally over time, humans have grown a little bit taller. And if you ever go to one of those old antebellum homes, you will see that those doorknobs are uncomfortably low. I'm 5 feet 10, so I would almost have to bend over to open those doors. A woman my age in those days would probably not have been as tall as I am now. So that's one example of how we change over time to adapt to things around us. And it's just part of natural law. Fossil record is the use of fossils. And fossils are the remains of dead things, living things that have died. So we use those in sedimentary rock to learn about the past. And when we talked about rocks back in earth science, we talked about fossils. So that should be reviewed a little bit. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it because we've already covered it. And I know you want to get through this too. So, natural selection. This is a theory proposed by Charles Darwin that nature selects traits that are good for the species, like the moth. Nature knew that in an area where there are black trees, white moths were not good for the species. So nature selects those traits that are best for the species that would help that species survive. It's called survival of the fittest. And finally, traits are simply features or characteristics of a living thing. So you have my traits are that I'm 5 feet 10. I have black hair, almost black eyes. Traits are things that were passed down to me from my ancestors. Alrighty, that brings us to the end of the evolution terms, and I'll see you soon for the ecosystem terms.